Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. I'm Matt, and we're back this week with my brother, Austin Douglas. How you doing today, sir?
Fantastic.
Yeah. Guys, this week we are going to chat about the Columbus Marathon 2025, which was not originally planned to be that eventful of a year, and ended up being quite the eventful year, but still an unbelievable experience, as it always is. If you guys caught our episode with Darius, you heard us really dive deep into the meaning and the power behind the Columbus Marathon and how it sets itself apart so differently from most races across the country and really establishes itself as America's and arguably the world's most meaningful marathon. And if you've been a part of Impossible Performance in this podcast for a long time, you know what a cornerstone this marathon is in everything we do, and how so many of our roots came from the pursuit of this marathon and raising money for kids battling cancer and inspiring and motivating and building them up to find their highest potential and chase their dreams in life. And we have all of those moments wrapped in today's episode, and I'm incredibly excited. But first, I want to actually turn things over to Austin, because while he's been a crucial and vital part of the marathon experience the last few years as supportive crew, this is the first year that he has actually been able to participate in the marathon as a runner. And it's because this year, and we actually just got conclusive evidence of this, he is officially cancer-free and in remission for the longest period that he has had to date since his battle with cancer. So what does it mean to you, brother, to hear those words and to know that truth?
I still haven't been able to swallow that pill entirely, I would say. On the topical sense, it would be I'm in disbelief. I'm shocked. I can't imagine. It's been difficult to imagine a world to where I'm not failing within my period of remission. But on a deeper level, it has been freeing somewhat in terms of where I've been wanting to go for quite some time now. And not necessarily in previous remission times and now, because the individual that sits in front of you is not the same that was hoping to achieve, PFS or progression-free survival in 2023, and then especially in 2020 or in 2024, but especially 2023. I'm so vastly different. But from where for what I'm wanting to accomplish, what we are trying to accomplish, it's so wildly different from before, and so it holds a different meaning for when and how I was hoping that this remission would go. I would say that this time around there were two things that were hovering above my head, or sort of the cloud that I was living in, that produced those clouds. The first was, as we know, my next possible treatment would have been a heavy hitter. Yeah. So, and not only just in terms of the initial site of treatment, but its effects would have lingered on and on for a very long time in a very different manner from the previous rounds of treatment. But then the second thing was, from the individual that I've been able to procure through these times of kind of putting hammer to anvil, is just really needed. I've needed a break. Yeah. If I can get a little bit of good news, I think, and I know that the individual that sits here now can take this kind of news and really produce something extraordinary from it. Before, could I have placed myself within a mindset that would have been able to conquer what I've wanted to conquer? Maybe. But the individual now that I am, ready to conquer whatever I can in the future, I know that it will happen, and many more things will come from it. A lot more positivity and impact will blossom kind of on the side of the path, as well as just not on the, as well as not only on the path, but just all around. And that's, instead of a nasty, muddy dirt road, I imagine it as a kind of a field of possibilities that I've kind of opened up now with this person being able to engage in a certain mindset with ultimately kind of getting a break.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's I understand that feeling you talk about of the disbelief of the situation, like not even being able to comprehend it or wrap your mind around it or just fully accept it. Because when you battle something so intense and so demanding for so long, and then you go through time and again of hearing that news of it didn't work, it's back, it's going to make you hesitant. I think it's going to make you hesitant to even be able to trust a positive outcome.
I haven't accepted it yet. That's a good way to put it, though. That's a good word for it. I certainly have not accepted it. And I don't want to put any negative, gravitational pull on that ability and decision to be made in terms of a timetable for acceptance. But to sit here and say that I expect to be accepting of this news by this date, no. No.
Yeah. Well, hope is a tricky thing. It's a difficult thing because while it can be a powerful and driving and useful emotion, when it's stripped from you, it can be an incredibly damaging feeling.
Hope. Sorry to cut you off, but
No,
hope.
you're good.
I just want to say that hope is no longer in the vocabulary for me. I don't carry a whole lot of hope for the future. I plan, and there are a lot of things that some people would say that they kind of use within the world of hope, like I hope this happens and I hope that happen. I'm planning for those things to happen, and if they don't happen, it's because I didn't execute.
Taking more of a direct
approach
over the situation.
Yeah, exactly, because control and power has been taken away from me so many times now. So that for me to be able to inflict something positive, not only for within my life, that then obviously sends ripples out into those around me, I need to make sure that I'm at the I need to guarantee to myself, for myself, that I am in the best position to serve my future, but then those futures that I very much intend on having intertwined with mine. And to sit here and to sure, you can say that, oh well, Austin's planning on having a family and everything, but and that's a really good hope to have. You can use that vocabulary, but I'm trying to I'm somewhat successfully doing is stripping away that word from my vocabulary and all, because it's the only thing that hope has really gotten me in the past 30 years is pain, suffering, betrayal, and also kind of delayed betrayal as well. And hope is something that I've put into a lot of people and events and chances, And I've been burned so many times by so many people and so many events and so many chances that it's time for me to stop relying on it so much. And if that means that I have to, which this sort of response to those occurrences may sound, my response to these occurrences may sound severe to a lot of people, but I'm done hoping. I'm planning. Does that mean that my list of goals kind of expands a little bit? Because obviously you have your goals, and let's say it's a list of just 20, bear with me. Let's just say it's a list of 20 goals that you have for the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. And then you have some hopes that are onto the side. You're like, oh, well, I intend on doing this, and I can just kind of hope that this kind of swims along in the pond that I'm swimming in, and then it kind of attaches to my timeline, and my pathway, and ultimately it would be nice to have that, right? I've relied so heavily on that and relied so insignificantly on the goal side that I've noticed in the past few years that a slow twisting of the dial to open up and rely a little bit more on the goal side and less on the hope side still has not produced the results that I expect. There's still a lot of aspects within my life that I'm very not happy about, and it's due to my inaction. And so in terms of goals, I've had to crank on that dial, and it's like that Seneca quote that I had uttered a while ago, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but it's the man. How does it go? I forget it. But it's just basically, if you don't know what port that you were sailing to, then you were just aimlessly kind of sailing the seas. Yeah. Like, I have gestured generally towards the port as to which I think I'm sailing to, and all of that hesitation and that hope, again, has just it's tattered my ship quite heavily, and I'm tired of that, and I'm done with that. So inaction is turning into action, and hope is turning into execution, and that's my take on hope now.
Yeah,
I'm done with it.
Yeah, it makes sense too. I mean, that's we talk about it a lot on the show. This idea of exhibiting the control that you have over any situation, and learning actually and building the skill of controlling different domains, such as being able to control and regulate your emotions, being able to control and regulate your own mind, being able to control and regulate your spirit as well as the physical body. We talk about that in the 4 domains of performance. We spend a lot of time talking about control and the power of influence we have over particularly ourselves, and then through ourselves the world around us. We're not going to have absolute control in every area. In fact, there's probably a majority of areas that we don't have control over, but the areas that we do have control over contain within them so much power and possibility and potential that it ends up seeming as if it creates a lot of flow around the circumstances around us. And like you say, when we accept that responsibility, because I think power flows toward where responsibility flows. That's the thing I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's not, in I think it was Spider-Man that Marvel coined the term, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh yeah, there we go.
But I actually think it's backwards.
Rest in peace, Uncle Ben.
But I think it's backwards. I think it's where you accept great responsibility, great power will come. And we see that in areas like what you're describing, where when you accept great responsibility over your life and its outcome and all of the things that happen to you, it will give you significantly more power to be able to influence that. Now, that doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be able to affect whether or not your cancer had come back for this round of scans. But it does mean that you're going to be able to impact your own mindset, your own wellness, your own ability to deal with whatever circumstance that may arise. And even one step further than that, just your own acceptance of your responsibility for your own health and your own wellness, physically speaking. I mean, that makes a big impact. You know, if you compound that across the entirety of a lifetime, like, you can actually have influence as to whether or not your cancer comes back, just by putting yourself in as healthy and as well of a position as possible. So I think there's a lot to accept there, and that's certainly a very stoic-minded philosophy, that idea of, I'm going to control what I can control, and I'm going to let go of what I can't control. You know, that's rooted deeply in all of Stoic philosophy, and I think it's a worthwhile practice.
I forget where this came from, the noise versus signal.
Yeah. I was thinking about that last night. It's a Steve Jobs philosophy, actually.
This is me reducing the noise and increasing the signal.
Yeah.
And it hurts me. It really does. Even in this moment, I'm holding just thinking about it. It hurts me somewhat to have to come to this position, because hope has such a positive connotation. And it certainly I've had some monumental moments that hope could have been intertwined with, but unfortunately for me, it's been the needle is swaying heavily towards the side of negative impact.
Yeah.
And so my reaction again is to that mindset, reducing the noise and increasing the signal heavily. I'm done feathering the dial. It's time that I crank on it, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I can go down, and I'll do on a we can do it a different time. But you know, we just, with life in general, and like I said before, the individual that sits here now realizes not only the potential but the sacredity, the sacred nature of life itself, and how I'm not gaining time. So
yeah,
nobody is, but it's taken me way too long to realize that I'm not, that life is not forever.
Yeah. And
I need to stop acting like it, and that means removing hope as a term in my vocabulary, but that's what I was missing in my explanation, was just I'm heavily reducing the noise and cranking up that signal.
Yeah.
So
yeah. If you guys hadn't heard of that before, it's this concept that Steve Jobs would talk about a lot, the signal to noise ratio, he called it. And basically signal to noise is basically, where are you spending your time, your energy, your resources, everything that you have at your disposal. Is it going more towards signal, or is it going more toward noise? Signal being that pursuit, that purpose of your life, the thing that you are here to serve, essentially, whatever that is, whether that's becoming the greatest powerlifter possible, the greatest father possible, or you might have multiple priorities stacked into that, but the signal is basically the purpose of your life. Noise is everything else that distracts you from that. So ideally, we want to get to a point where we find a ratio of that drives as much growth and forward purpose and direction in the signal area as possible, with as little focus on the noise as possible. So, you know, like here at this podcast, for example, in Impossible Performance, you know, we've got our mission and vision for Impossible Performance. Well, if we're spending time just mindlessly scrolling through Instagram reels for 3 hours a day that have nothing to do with our own personal growth and mindset and the forward drive of this mission and vision, that's all noise. That's all stuff that's not contributing to the growth of what we're here to serve. And Kevin O'Leary is actually the one who's kind of repopularized it. He's the guy from Shark Tank that you guys know. He's owns tons of businesses, very financially successful, great financial mind, great business and leadership mind as well. But he actually got to work very closely with Jobs. He was a big part of growing and developing Apple in its more earlier years. And he was always fascinated by this signal to noise ratio. And he said that Steve Jobs had the highest signal to noise ratio of anybody he'd ever met, with one exception. And he said Steve Jobs operated about an 80-20 ratio, where 80% of everything he did, his thoughts, his emotions, his feelings, his pursuits, everything went toward that goal of driving forward Apple to be the innovative company that he grew it to be today. And he had about 20% noise, where he was spent, just kind of aimlessly distracted by other things. And so Steve Jobs, that level of operator, was at an 80-20. I think if we all took a time to sit back and reflect on our own lives of where we're spending our time, just like a financial budget, budgeting your time, budgeting your energy, budgeting your thoughts, where are those things going to? We may not even be at 50% signal, but I can promise you that just an active focus on this concept will automatically help raise your signal and reduce your noise in your life. Just the focus on this and wanting to improve the time you spend on signal. And this is something that I've been fascinated with, because I think about some of the world's greatest minds, entrepreneurs, leaders, operators, I guess you could call them. We all have the same 24 hours. And yes, people will come up with the excuse of, oh, well, it'd be easy if I had unlimited money and, people to do all these things for me, people to cook and clean and do whatever else. And it's like, yeah, okay, that helps. But look at people like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, owns 4 multi-billion-dollar companies and a profoundly successful acting career. Is a leader in and performs still in WWE and for the XFL and all of these areas that he's juggling and focused on, and yet he still carves out time to be an incredibly good father and husband and just human being in general. And so it's like, how does he have so much output in the same 24 hours that we have? And then you look beyond that to the one exception to the rule that Kevin O'Leary had, which is Elon Musk, which nobody can deny that he is definitely the most effective operator alive today, and possibly that has ever lived, as far as the scope of what he has been able to influence and create as just one individual human being. And yes, he has amazing teams behind him, backing him and supporting him, but still what he is driving forward, the main businesses that he's, between Starlink, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, what he's driving forward in these domains would absolutely not exist without him. And Kevin O'Leary described him as being the only person he's ever met to not only have a higher signal to noise ratio than Steve Jobs, but to actually be at 100% signal and no noise, in that every ounce of output and resource and energy and time that flows from him is all dedicated toward that mission he's here to serve. And that's quite a profound place to get to. But at the end of the day, even Elon Musk still has the same 24 hours that we have. Mm-hmm. He has access to no more time output. And so I'm not saying that we all have to be Elon Musk in terms of output, but I think that frame of reference helps us massively remove these limitations we place on ourselves. Because the number one thing that Austin and I hear all the time is, I don't have time, I can't do that, I'm too busy. All of these things that we automatically put these limitations on ourselves of, I can't do that because this. And it's like, well, if you don't want to do that, for example, the marathon, if you don't want to go run a marathon, that's one thing, that's fine. If it's not serving your purpose in life, that's great. But there's so many people that would like to do something like that. they seem fascinated by it, and they love the concept and the idea, and it calls to them of, I would love to do this someday. But then immediately there's these limitations that arise that we create for ourselves. And I don't know if it's some sort of safety compensatory mechanism or whatever it is, but it's this idea immediately arises of
survival.
Yeah, exactly. Of, oh, I don't have time for that, or I'm too busy for that, or whatever else it may be. If you strip back and realize how much time and how much output you truly have access to by looking at the lens of some of these great operators like The Rock, like Elon Musk, like Kevin O'Leary himself, you realize we've all got access to the same basic resources of life. How am I managing mine? Where is my signal? Where is my noise? And when you start taking that kind of mental approach, it will profoundly change your life. I can promise you that. Mm-hmm. So it's a good skill to focus on, a good philosophy to look at, and just a great way to budget and assess your own life, and where are you putting your greatest resources? And that's the question we all got to ask ourselves. But that is that was a big part in playing into this year's Columbus Marathon.
Yeah.
Because it was not a big year for us in terms of the marathon, because this year had, for me personally, been mostly spent on pursuing the 500-pound squat, which we made happen in August. And then it took me about a solid month to fully recover from that squat, which if any of you have ever stepped on a powerlifting stage, you know exactly what that's like, especially if you're pushing to impossible levels of performance. So it took me about a solid month to kind of fully recover from that before I was able to really start pushing marathon training. And it ended up that I had about 28 days to train for a marathon before I was going to have to start tapering and resting up and getting prepared for the race itself. And so it was just one of those times, just like with the we talk about the signal to noise ratio, where I just wanted to use it as an example to show, like, hey, you don't have to have all of this time to train. You don't have to have all of this this massive schedule laid out ahead of you. You don't have to have all of this preparation necessarily. Just go out and find whatever your highest potential is, whatever you could make happen. And I wanted to show people, hey, I can go from having run 0 miles this year, and that's not an exaggeration, like literally 0 miles this year, to 28 days, I'll train to be able to do a marathon. You know, whether that's a half marathon or a full marathon or somewhere in the middle, I knew I could get there. And so that was the goal. And honestly, training was going far more smoothly than it had ever gone before. At this point, I was actually quite excited for this year because my body was feeling good. My heart rate regulation was behaving. So many things seemed to be lining up. And then, you know, as happens from time to time, the unknown crops up, and it can either be something that tears you down, limits you, breaks you, takes you from the path. It can either be noise, or you can turn it into signal. You can turn it into a vector for forward progress in your own personal mission, your own purpose. And that's a choice we all have to make. And accepting of that responsibility, like we talked about, will give you so much more power and influence over the outcome of the situation. And so that's what happened this year. Austin and I were on our final training run at the Civitan Park. We're actually only a week out from the race, and I was going to do a long run because I just needed to get one more long run in to give my body some more time under tension, but actually mostly just to kind of test where I was at the moment. And things had started out feeling pretty good overall. It was about 2.5 miles in, and then I go to sit down and take my leg off, wipe the sweat off of it, which is something I do very commonly. I have to do that about every 2 to 3 miles throughout the race. So I've done this 100 times before, never had an issue. Got everything cleaned up, stood back up, and thought I heard my leg click and lock itself into place. And then I went to take a running striding step to get back into that run and that training. And all of a sudden, as soon as I bring my prosthetic side of my leg over, I feel it slip right out of the prosthetic. And I had already gone through the motion of extending my leg forward. And so I realize in a split second what's happening. My leg comes out of the prosthetic and I am falling, and I land directly full force of my body weight on the end of that bone that is my residual limb on the tibia there, which, if you are an amputee or an adaptive athlete, you know that is about the most possibly sensitive area of your body. And anytime you ever think about like an injury like that, it's just one of those that makes you want to throw up. And that's about what happened. I remember the split moment of realizing what was going to happen, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. And then I remembered the moment of impact, and it actually gave me, it wasn't an actual concussion, but that was the feeling that it gave me from just landing on that bone as hard as I did. My vision went blurry. I was on the verge of passing out, on the verge of throwing up, and I was just kind of groaning in pain on the ground. I think I was on the ground for 10 or 15 solid minutes before I could even just bring myself to my own senses of being able to figure out next steps. Fortunately, Austin was there with me. I was able to get up onto a bench, call him. He came, picked me up, took me home. We got home, and I realized there's like a red spot on my sock because I hadn't taken the leg off or anything, or the liner or anything off at this point. And I was like, well, that's weird. I was like, is that blood? But I have this thick gel liner on, so we didn't think there's any way I could bleed through that. No, I had. We took the liner off and just blood everywhere, soaking everything. What had ended up happening, long story short, is the bone had come through and actually punched a hole in the end of the end of the skin and flesh of my residual limb, which is not a great thing to happen. But in this case, a lot of times the bone can actually shatter and break, and that can be a very, very devastating injury for amputees, particularly in terms of infection and potential for amputation revision. I've seen people go from a below knee to an above knee because of severe injuries like this, which would be a horrendous thing to have happened. However, fortunately, even with that level of impact that it took, the bone was not damaged whatsoever. So that was a huge, huge, huge blessing. As soon as we got those x-rays back and the doctor confirmed that, I was just elated. And that was the main concern put to rest. So that was really good. And it's because of all my years of hardcore heavy lifting that I was actually able to build up the bone density to withstand an injury like that. So that's why, just another reason we all should be focusing on, even if it's not your main pursuit, some level of resistance training is huge for your own health and wellness, and just being able to withstand and stay strong and capable through injuries like that, because it builds up the musculature, it builds up the joints, it builds up the bone density. It's such a powerful tool that we have available to us. But all that aside, we post a picture that day of me with my x-ray, and I say, I talk about like what happened, but at the very top of the post, I say in parentheses, I say, yes, I'm still running the marathon next weekend. And at the time, I had no idea what that was going to look like. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get back in my running blade. At the time, I really thought I was going to. I didn't know if I was going to be on crutches. I had no idea what was going to happen. But the point I wanted to make, despite that injury, was you can always show up. You don't have to accept any limitations in any scenario, because it would have been so easy and everybody would have understood after an injury like that for me to say, oh, this injury happened, I'm not going to be running the race this year, but it's all good, we'll be back next year. It would have been so easy to have said that. Everybody would have understood. But it would have done nothing to reinforce our message. It would have done nothing to demonstrate that pursuit of the highest of our highest potential. It would have done nothing to promote this idea that limitations do not exist. It would have done nothing to showcase something impossible. And not only that, but I've been fortunate to go down this path for long enough now that it's really like my default programming, my default wiring isn't even built for that anymore. It's like something like this injury happens, and immediately I'm asking the question, what can I still do, rather than what can I not do? And so I know that kind of mindset can be built, that kind of programming can be established. And so we wanted to use this as an opportunity to show everyone else that, yeah, you can still show up, you can still make this happen, you can still keep an open mind to what could still be done, with that level of impossible mindset, and creating that person that can overcome these challenges, that can work through these injuries, that can find their highest potential regardless of any situation. That's what we're here. That's what we've always been here to show up and establish. Like, we're never going to be the people that go out and win the marathon. Mm-hmm. We're going to be the people that show up to the marathon despite every reason not to, and still find a level of performance that doesn't even make sense, that should be impossible. And that's what we got to do on October 19th of this year. And it was a lot of fun, and it was a true honor, actually. So I ended up walking on my normal walking leg with crutches to help take a lot of the impact and the shock off of my prosthetic side, and it actually worked out well. It kind of got me to allowed me to use kind of all four limbs in the race. Mm-hmm. And I had Austin right there beside me for every mile of it, and it was just an absolute blast of a race this year. Despite being a little cold, despite being a little wet, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there was a lot of rain going on that day.
Yes, so. There was. But it's like Star Blackford, Darius's wife, Darius, the race director, he was on a couple weeks ago. Definitely check out his episode if you haven't yet, where we really dive in and lay out a lot of the meaning behind the Columbus Marathon. But we were chatting with his wife the day before, and she's an absolute beast. She's going to come on the podcast here soon. But she's run Badwater 135, that race that David Goggins is famous for. She's run it a few times and planning for a third time. And she said, when we were little kids, we all used to pray for nothing more than to be able to go out and run and play in the rain. She's like, why has that mindset changed as we become adults? Because so many people were so upset and so afraid of the rain and everything. And when I heard that, I was like, you know what? Like, there's so much profound wisdom in that sort of mindset. Like, why would we allow ourselves to lose this childhood excitement of being able to go out and play in the rain with almost a sense of reckless abandon for what negative things might happen? It's like, well, what positive things might happen? And I just really loved that perspective she brought to the table, because it was such a stark and dramatic shift to the collective mindset that so many had. And it brought up a powerful point that you really can't argue or refute. And I think it helps kind of awaken some of that inner adventurous spirit that we can so easily lose. So it was a lot of fun chatting with her about that. But from your perspective, dude, what was the marathon experience itself like? Especially being your first time.
It was a wonderful time. I had the experience of everything starting up to the, starting line gun going off. Mm-hmm. But then after that, it's just sitting in the tent. And what was it? The first year was running assistance for you and JD. And that was a lot. That was a very complex day. I would say driving Lauren's Subaru, absolutely terrorizing the suburbs of Columbus, just trying to maneuver around the course and keep you guys fueled, prepped, have a lot of different things ready for you guys, especially the hand cycle that we had ready for you. So that was certainly an experience. And shout out to Courtney for for hanging out the entire day, taking obviously killer photos, but also helping me navigate as well. There was only so much that I could do and still try to concentrate on driving and not running over runners or other people trying to do similar things to what I was. And then the last year, I had already started my immunotherapeutic and chemo regimen in September. So about a month before the race, I had already started a very, very heavy intro regimen before the bone marrow transplant. And so when the race came around and JD was running the full, that year was really, really difficult because JD then asked me to kind of help out, and I tried to do the best I could, but I missed him at the break off of the half marathon, going, turning right instead of left for the full. I missed him, and I tried to run up to him and stuff like that, and I was yelling his name, and so many people looked at me and it was just like, you okay, dude? And I'm like, I'm trying to catch up with this guy, but I'm also on like a lot of chemo, and I feel like garbage right now. And so that was my experience of the Columbus Marathon the past 2 years, of not being able to do it due to relapsing September-ish for both 2023 and 2024. And so coming into this year, getting ready for the first time actually racing in it, was a surreal experience. But I certainly have to admit that my training wasn't nearly as good as my previous attempts at half marathons, and it suffered mostly because of it was late August, early September time is where I had felt my lymph nodes swell up again. And so for me, mentally, I was pretty much in the dumps coming into the race. And it is a bit selfish because I wish that I could have pushed that over to the side, because that's not the point of the race at all. It's not about me running, yes, it's great to run my first half marathon at the Columbus Marathon, the most meaningful race out there. But I tried to, it was difficult for me to remind myself as to why we were doing the race. It wasn't for me completing the 13.1 miles. It was about experiencing the track for the first time in its fullness, seeing the patient champions and their tents. They seemed to be having a good time in the rain, and it was a nice reminder, because there were certainly some moments that I was not having a good time, because it was weird. My shoes were breaking down. Now, they were old 400 plus mile on cloud Eclipses that I had on, and I'm not bashing on them, they had done me so much good. They were done. Yeah. And they started, the soles started to kind of move around on me, and so I was like walking into like holes in my shoes. It never stopped raining. It was cold, and it was a time for me to endure some suffering. Yeah. And I think it was a bit of a test for my patience, and I was getting into my own head, but it definitely forced me to kind of work back out of my head and into the moment. And it was difficult, and like I said, in a few times, but for me, it was a huge challenge. It was a very large challenge to get through that race. And I absolutely, I don't know, when it rains outside, I wasn't the kid that went out to the puddle and stomped in it. But
it's not in your nature. You're from Scotland.
But see, now that's where I'm going with this is I wasn't that kid, but now that I've been to Scotland and I've gone through, when you visit the UK and Scotland, and I've done 4 times now, you have to just be ready for some rain, regardless of the time that you're there. It's an island. It's an island that is up against the Atlantic Ocean. you're gonna experience
gotta
some rain.
embrace it.
You have to embrace it, and that's what I've been able to do with the help of a good friend of mine. Shout out to Mikey, of our adventures over there, and even in Paris, we went through some really. It's still in very nice clothes, but then a jacket on top that was trying to hold off some of the water intrusion. We walked a few miles just to go to the Louvre, and that was it rained about half the distance. Walking around we were walking on the outskirts of the Seine, the river there, and just having those kinds of experiences. It kind of took me back a little bit to that, and to the hiking and the traversing Edinburgh, and ultimately it just reminded me that I am Scottish in my ancestral ties, and that I not only need to be used to this, but I should really embrace this. I don't know. It woke something a bit primal in me, was what was going through that race, and it ultimately took me back to the time of when I was we were doing Pee Wee football. I didn't enjoy running in puddles, but I always enjoyed the days that it would rain during football practice, and even a football game, not a match. It's not a match, it's a game. And it was just like the rain would just awaken me. Yeah. Like I was a lineman. I was a chubby little kid, and so I was nowhere near the front of the line because we would always do sprints and then runs, longer runs. But when it would rain, man, I would just smoke everybody. I just loved it, and it really brought back a little bit of that. But ultimately the race, I had to sit there and I had those moments to where I had to remind myself of why I'm doing this. It was not for me to finish the 13.1 miles was not the point of this at all. It was for the patient champions, those who were patients before, patients now, and who will be patients in the future. Even though we want that number to dwindle to as low as possible, it's still going to happen. There's a reality check there, but we can do everything in our power, and it kind of ties back into my thoughts before of like I can sit here and hope that kids don't have to deal with this, or we can plan and execute as much whatever we can for the future to try and prevent that. Mm-hmm. So not to erase childhood cancer, but to do what we can to increase the awareness, increase the funding, and to reduce the amount of suffering that they have to experience as much as possible. That's what we can do, and that's what I had to remind myself again and again during that race, because there were moments I was not the happiest camper. I'm very willing to admit that, but ultimately I came out of that race being very thankful to have had the experience, and I'm excited for next year. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about endurance sports in general is that it accelerates. It creates a crucible for growth, in the sense that regardless of what the weather conditions are, there will be so much pain and suffering over such a long period of time. And I don't care who you are, if you're pushing to a high enough degree, you will constantly, at so many moments throughout that race, be questioning, why am I even here? Why am I even doing this? I can't keep going on. I can't keep doing this. It's going to push you to that point. And that's good. It should. Because every moment that you overcome that line of thinking, you gain so much strength, so much growth, so much control over many of the domains of performance. And so in the span of 4 hours or 13 miles or whatever it is for you, you accelerate so much growth and so much learning and so much development through that crucible of the long form pain and suffering that I don't think you can in really many other circumstances. I mean, powerlifting has its own incredible struggles and challenges, and I think it forces you to push yourself to levels that you never would have found accessible otherwise. And so it's unique in its own ways, but because of the duration of endurance sports and the simple fact that all you have to do is just continually choose to not quit, it creates this lovely crucible of just accelerating growth and helping you access and find so many new areas. And it's especially true with the conditions that we had that day, because it was cold and it was raining, and we had rain jackets and all the gear to try to help protect. And after about 2 hours in, you're just all soaked through anyway. Mm-hmm. And I was wet inside my jacket, I was wet outside. So you just hit this point where you just remove all that gear and you just accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
But it's like you talked about, that each child's tent that we passed, they were elated to be there, and their families were so thankful for all the runners. The marathon didn't appear in full force this year, in the sense that the spectators and the bands and all those people who are normally there to cheer and support and everything that goes into it just weren't out in as full force as they usually are. But every single kid was still there at their tent. Their families were still there along the encore and the remembrance miles. There were still so many families that came out, and I actually recognized quite a few this year, which was a really cool experience. They still came out to honor their loved ones and their kids who have fought and represented in the past. And they were not about to let a little bit of rain even remotely dampen their spirits. And so I think you see that kind of energy and that kind of excitement from a child, and you can't help but feel a little bit lighter in your heart and feel a little bit more ecstatic. And our race ended up looking a little different because of the crutches situation. I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do even at the start of the race. It was a bit comical. We actually started dead last in the pack. It took us about 10 or 20 minutes just to even get to the start line, because you get 15,000 runners, and it takes a minute to cross the line. We stayed clear in the back because I didn't want to be in anybody's way with the whole crutch situation, and I could just only walk so fast with those crutches, and we're pushing it was honestly like a 28 to 30 minute per mile pace, so very, very, very slow. And I had no idea. I was like, maybe I'll get 2 miles. I was like, I'd be happy with 2 miles. If I got 4 or 5, that would be amazing. I was going to be ecstatic with 4 or 5 miles. And we actually started making plans for Lauren to show up and meet us at the 4 to 5 mile mark, just to kind of pick us up and take us back to the finish line area. And then one of the drivers came up, who was actually driving he was matching the course pace minimum, basically the minimum speed you need to go to be able to stay on course, because they have to start tearing it down behind you. It's not just something where they can keep it open for 12 hours. And so he pulls up to us and lets us know that we're falling off course minimum pace, which is something I fully expected. And he said, you're welcome to run on the sidewalks. He said, or you could just take this turn up here and cut out like 4 miles of the half marathon and still stay on course, still get to run with all the runners, still get to cross the finish line. You'll have plenty of time. And I said, yeah, that's no problem. Thank you. But we'll stay on the sidewalks. That was my initial gut reaction, because that's what I'd always kind of programmed myself toward. Like, I don't care if I got to run on sidewalks. I don't, care about a certain pace. I just want to be able to show up and find my highest potential. And so that's immediately what my gut was saying. And then we got up to mile 2.5, somewhere around there. And there's a big out and back at the Columbus Marathon. And so we're on the side where we're at like mile 2. There's a ton of runners on the other side of the road that are running back the opposite direction. They're at like mile 7.
It was 6.5. It was right before mile 7.
Okay.
Because you had the turn up towards the hospital.
Yeah.
And we cut right before there.
Yeah. And so I started thinking about it. I realized, I was like, you know what? I'm not planning on completing the full 13.1 miles today. Like, that's not saying I couldn't have pushed my body to that point, but that was not the point I was there to prove that day. I said, if I'm hoping to get 4 to 5 miles regardless, like, it is like, that would be an extreme, amazing achievement. I'd be super happy with that. So we might as well do that 4 to 5 miles with the rest of the runners, with the rest of the crew, and get to see the hospital. And I wanted Austin to be able to experience some of these best moments of the Columbus Marathon, because the best moments are not necessarily in the out and back. It's a very pretty part of the marathon when you get through some of the suburbs of Bexley, but it's not like the most impactful moments. So I said, let's just cross the road here. Let's just join back in with the runners and see where we go with this. And so we did that and ended up crossing over. We had done 2 miles, crossed over, and still had another 6 to 7 left of the half marathon course that was available to us to complete. And ended up going down East Broad Street, crossing the bridge, coming up across the hospital. Got to see a lot of patient champions, and it ended up being, I was so happy with that decision, even though internally it felt a little bit like negative internally at first, because I'm so used to like programming myself to just like keep an open mind to your own potential, don't hold any limiting beliefs, and I never want to like cross the finish line of a race I never earned, if that makes sense. And so I knew that cutting out those 4 to 5 miles was really going to, obviously we weren't going to complete the full 13.1, but again, that wasn't even what we were there to prove that day. And so we get to experience all of these amazing parts of the race. We get to be with a lot of the rest of the runners. We get to see a lot of the patient champions. We had so many moments where we got to, what are you trying to say?
There's one in particular moment that I think made the entire race
Oh,
worth
I'm
it.
building to that.
Okay, wonderful. My apologies.
Can't just mess up my mojo.
I will sit here, man.
We got to have so many of these incredible, impossible experiences that never would have happened otherwise. If we hadn't made that turn, we would have simply just been walking by ourselves on the sidewalk, and it would have, not only would it have made the experience more difficult and more challenging and far less rewarding for ourselves, it wouldn't have impacted or inspired anybody, because nobody would have been aware of what we were there trying to do. And so I ended up being kind of, my eyes being opened to, this is a different option for the race, and this is a way that's going to be more impactful, more motivational, more inspiring for everyone else who gets to be a part of it. And it kind of just involved me stripping my own ego back a little bit and being willing to accept that, hey, it's just not going to happen today, but that's not the point you're here to prove. Stay focused on the mission, stay true to the signal of what we're here to do, and don't get distracted by the noise of your own ego. And so that was a big realization for me. And I think so much of my happiness from this race came just in that realization, that acceptance of, you're here to serve others. You're not here to serve your own ego. And that was a powerful thing for me. And I was very thankful for that experience. But as Austin alluded to, there was one moment of this race that set itself apart so profoundly from probably any other moment I've had with the Columbus Marathon. And this moment is the reason why we do not accept limitations. It's the reason why we still show up every single time to face the impossible, to find that impossible version of ourselves amidst the challenge, amidst the struggle, amidst the chaos. And we ultimately use that person to do the impossible. And it happened just after we crossed mile 9. We'd completed East Livingston. We turned down to head toward High Street. And we're walking down this road, and all of a sudden I hear somebody yell out my name behind me. And I turn around, and there's Sam and his dad running toward us. And if you don't know Sam was the kid in 2023 who had the exact same type of cancer I had, Ewing sarcoma, which is a very rare pediatric bone cancer. And he was a patient champion back then. and we got to meet him and his family and help motivate and inspire them and show them, hey, this is what's still acceptable or accessible to you. Cancer is not the end of your journey. This is not the end of your story. And then 2 years later, unbeknownst to me, we're continuing down this course, and I hear my name and I turn around and there's him and his father running the half marathon together. Mm-hmm. Not a patient champion this year, not even showing up to be a part of the encore mile. They showed up to be runners in that race just 2 years later. And that made every moment of the injury, the race, the suffering of the rain and the endurance of the marathon, that made every moment worth it, getting to experience that. Because if I had not been injured, if I had not suffered that injury a week before the marathon, that moment would not have happened. We would not have run into each other. I probably would have never even known they were there. We never would have seen each other, certainly. If we had not chosen to turn off at mile 2 and rejoin the rest of the runners, that moment would not have happened. So many aspects of that day, if they had not, all of these seemingly negative things, if they had not aligned so perfectly, that moment would not have happened.
It was profound enough. I was standing there stunned.
Yeah.
I forgot to take a photo of you too, and I'm so glad that Sam's dad did, because I sat there. I was just like, Sam's running the race right now.
Yeah.
And then they took off, and I'm just like, oh God, I'm so thankful he took a photo. And you were, you were there in the moment, and I was just like, it was, like you said, it was profound. It was, that right there made, like you said, the race, it made everything worth it.
Yeah.
Seeing him and he just took off.
Yeah.
They took off, and it's just like, whoa, like it just seeing him in the position that he was physically 2 years ago to then now running a half marathon, dude, and running it. It's just, man, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's so powerful, because that's the living embodiment of everything of our vision. Like, we got to see our vision right before our eyes. Like, he is, there's so much wrapped into this. So Sam had the same type of cancer as me, but because of the research and advancement that has been made over the last 10 years, because of events like the Columbus Marathon, Sam didn't have to lose his leg like I did. And that in and of itself is an unbelievable gift to be able to witness. But then to see him take the reconstructed leg he has and go out and run a half marathon with it just 2 years after he had cancer, and not only to see him complete that feat physically, but to see him have so much faith and trust and confidence in his own self and his own ability to be able to go out and pursue something like that was breathtaking. Because I'll tell you right now, 2 years after I had cancer, I was not in that position. I was in one of the darkest spaces I've ever been in my life. And so to see him be able to overcome that challenge that comes after treatment, and to be able to accept his own potential and have an unruly faith in it and go out and perform and chase and pursue something impossible in such a condensed time frame, and to know that we were a small part of that. Words just can't even begin to describe that emotion. But that's what we're here to do. That's the vision for Impossible Performance. And you guys are all a part of that too. You are our global culture of strength. That's what we're here to build. And that's what we're going to build across the entire world. And it was
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a true gift. True gift.
What a marathon.
Yeah. And there were so many moments that we could highlight. You know, I got to talked to one of the old ECMO coordinators who recognized me actually 12 years after the fact, somehow recognized me in total disbelief that I was even on the course in general. That was a cool moment. We got to meet up with JD and Allie toward the end. JD had actually suffered a pretty bad physical set of events early on in the race. You know, sometimes the magic of electrolytes and fueling just doesn't line up, and some things
feeding the fish, man. You can't feed them.
Some things just got to come out.
Yeah.
You know, but this was an amazing part of the race because it happened right around that mile 4 to 5 time, where he was really physically struggling, which is where JD had his first ever true panic attack at the Columbus Marathon at mile 4 that took him off the course. And this time around, he runs into similar struggles around that same spot in the race. But rather than allowing that situation to control him and allowing himself to be a victim of those circumstances, he turned around, he rallied, he caught up to Austin and I, and he continued on and set a pretty amazing time for that race, overcoming all of these mental challenges that popped up along the way. And that showed so much tremendous strength and growth and development from him that he, prior to this, had not always had access to. And so that was a huge honor to be able to witness that. And then we still, got to cross the finish line. Even though we'd gone off course, we got to cross the finish line. I did not accept a medal for the 3rd year in a row now, because I'll never do that for a race I didn't complete. But what a profound year. And I entered that tent finally dry, finally getting some semblance of warmth, just with more gratitude than I think I've maybe ever finished a Columbus Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was just so nice to be able to step back and kind of be in our own little world and just get to be more of a conscious observer of the experience around us. And that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was our Columbus Marathon experience 2025 for you guys. We actually have, so you guys have heard us talk about it on the podcast, but our school platform that we have live now, the link is below in the show notes.
Oh, yeah.
That is our online community we've built. It is our global culture of strength that we're constructing. And it's been such a fun platform to learn and grow and develop on all together. We have courses on there. We do live meetups. We do webinars. We have discussion boards for all sorts of different topics. But it's a community of people all dedicated toward their impossible pursuit, which are not all the same. They're all different. But we all come together. We learn, grow, build together. And we help tackle a lot of these greatest challenges that come up in pursuit of the impossible. But beyond all that, our school members get a lot of inside access and opportunities for the podcast specifically. And one of those is being able to submit questions ahead of time, both to Austin and I and to our guests, knowing who the guests are ahead of time, getting early release of episodes. So if you guys want to dive in deeper to this podcast experience and what we're doing at Impossible Performance, click that link below for the school online community. Sign up to be a part of it today, and we would love to have you, because the greater we grow this community, the more impact it'll be able to have, the more moments like we had with Sam we'll be able to create for the world. And that at the end of the day is what we're here to do. But we did have a question from Arlen, who is actually a former guest of this podcast and always pursuing the impossible in her own life. And she wants to know, how did you maintain your fortitude towards the marathon with everything that happened during training, both from Matt and Austin's perspective? And so I'll let you dive into that first, brother.
Yeah, I alluded to it before with that question in mind, but I sort of spark notes would be not allowing, because for me it was a mental fight. It wasn't a physical fight. I physically I wasn't ready to do a 2-hour half marathon, but I was I have done it before, and I knew what it was going to take that way just to get across the finish line. So I wasn't worried about that. It was definitely more mental and emotional that I was having moments of stumbling over my own feet, pun intended, and
At least you have feet.
right, feet. It's a feet problem.
Must be nice.
Yeah, and I would say remaining within the realm of keeping the head above the surface was not allowing myself to keep those thoughts for too long. Like I wanted to feel them. I wanted to allow them to have a 30-second sort of period of time to be able to give me some sort of shape to how I felt and to how I move forward. But again, like, I don't mind giving negative emotional states time on stage, but it's extremely limited, and you have the shepherd's hook right there, ready to just yank them off. And that's how I was able to keep my head above the water, was giving those moments a little bit of time on stage. I wanted to hear them out. I wanted to hear myself out, and ultimately just it's kind of like getting into the gym when you're a bit angry at something. Just get in there and rip it off the ground, and you feel better at the end. It's kind of the same thing for me. Yeah. I kept the head above water because I realized that I am still human, which is always a very difficult thing for me to humbly remind myself of.
Well, you have to. We have to feel our negative emotion. Otherwise, it just gets internalized and buried, and then it resurfaces in very ugly, atrocious ways. The ultimate question comes down to, and this is where the skill lies, is do you control it or does it control you?
Right.
And the stage of a marathon or any endurance event is one of the perfect places to bring forth and feel some of that emotion, because it can be used as a driver, and you can work through a lot of things in that time frame, in that crucible I talk about.
You can't allow, because negative emotion like that burns hotter, but obviously if it burns hotter, it burns faster, and you run out of it real quick. Yeah. And if you hadn't built the consistency and the discipline and the proper fuel source to get through something, and in this case here, a half marathon, you definitely, like, that negative emotion can get you through the first half mile.
That's not gonna get you much further.
you got a little over 12 and a half to go.
Yeah.
So
or maybe a little boost partway through, but it's not gonna fuel your entire race. And that's one of the things we highlight on our school community specifically, is exhibiting control, building skill in all four domains of performance. We've already got courses up, introductory courses up for that, and we're going to be detailing courses for how to build control over your own emotions in this capacity and use them as positive driving forces. So that's another aspect of what you can gain from being a part of this community, and it's really what we're trying to build and help people build within themselves through Impossible Performance. It's very interesting because my race experience contrasts with yours a lot, in that mine was actually very physically challenged. Not just due to my missing leg in general, but due to the injury that I'd had a week before. And so it was all about, how can I push myself physically to find something impossible in this race, while at the same time not pushing my leg so far that it becomes dangerous and I increase risk of things like infection or things like that, because that would not have been worth the extra miles. And I actually had not mentioned it in the podcast yet, but where I said I would have been happy with 2 miles and ecstatic with 4 to 5 miles, we actually ended up completing 9 miles of the race that day. And my legs started giving out on me just in the end, just in the last half mile. And so it lined up perfectly. And it's another one of these examples of, wherever you think your limitations lie, they are so much infinitely beyond that. Like, I would have been ecstatic with 4 to 5 miles that day, and that really felt like I was going to be pushing myself quite hard to get there. And we got 9 miles in. 9 miles. We got almost double that. And so it just shows that it reinforces this mindset of limitations do not exist. We choose to accept that as our default setting, because when you accept that as your default setting, you're going to go so much farther than you ever think you would have been able to, that it basically feels as if there are no limitations. Yes, I had a point I reached where my leg eventually was not taken anymore. It was going to become more dangerous to continue on than it was worth going down that road, and that's fine. I was fully ready to accept that. I knew that was a point we were going to reach. But had I accepted limitations and said ahead of time, I only think that's 2 miles, I'm not going to do more than 2 miles, I would have left 7 miles on the table that day, 7 miles on the course. And beyond that, I would have left the experience with Sam. I would have left the experience with the ECMO nurse. I would have left the encore and remembrance miles. I would have left the finish line. I would have left all those moments on the table. They never would have happened. And so we have to be able to get to this point where we no longer, by default, allow ourselves to look at where our limitations lie. We have to get to where we by default look at where our potential could lie. And I think that is how you build ultimate fortitude and being able to endure not just marathon events, but injuries, setbacks, challenges, cancer relapses, whatever it is. Rather than seeing this situation, immediately focusing on all the ways it limits you and restricts you and controls you, we instead program ourselves to start looking at it as what positive can we create from this situation? What potential can we find amidst this challenge? What kind of opportunity can we build for others to see despite this impossible circumstance we're facing with? And when you have a mindset geared toward that sort of default setting, you will find so much more drive and motivation and discipline and power and confidence than you ever will by resting in limitations. And so that's the place we all have to get to. And it's a place you can absolutely program your mind to get to. And the way you do that is by continuing to listen to this podcast. And if this is your first episode with us, if this is your first episode with us, go back to number 1. If you're on YouTube, you'll have to find number 1 onward on probably Spotify or Apple.
1 to 30 something is on Spotify or Apple.
And just click play. I apologize ahead of time for the limited quality and production that we started with, minus the audio side. Austin's always been driving that strong. But some of those old videos, man, I look at them and I'm like, but that's in a way that actually
it embodies
our mission and our vision, because it shows the continual growth we've been able to make in what I view as a relatively short amount of time, and more exciting than that, the growth we can make and will make over the next several years. Yeah,
the green did a lot of good for us. So
it did. That, the second camera, the studio lights, there's a lot of things that have helped out along the way. But yeah, guys, we appreciate you joining into today's episode, checking this out. As always, the number one and only thing we ask of you guys is, if you got something out of today's episode, which we know you absolutely did, please go down, click share, and you can do this right now. Pause the episode, click share, click copy link, and then paste it into a message and send it to as many of your friends that you believe it would help, because that's really what we're here to do. That's how we share and spread this mission that we have at Impossible Performance. And it's ultimately how we realize the vision we have for everything we're doing here, is by spreading this podcast, spreading this platform, spreading this message, and showing people, giving them an introduction to the potential that they have that lies before them, because we know it's there. We've trained ourselves to see people not as they are, but as we know what they can be. And we want to help as many people as possible be able to realize that potential within themselves. So with that, brother, Anything else you have for today?
Absolutely not.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for sharing this episode and this platform. And thank you mostly for living out this message in your daily lives. Because as we said, that's where our vision really comes from. That's really what we're here to do. That is our signal that we chase every day with as high of a ratio as we can possibly muster and build upon over time. Because at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you guys for listening, and as always, be impossible.